Coming up on this week's show, a new Xbox hack could make life a lot easier.
Another Jeff Minter game comes to virtual reality.
And we chat to Ali Motisi, who's using retro tech to make new indie games.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our amazing mates at Bitmap Books. Now, one of my favourite books they've ever done, Game Boy, the Box Art Collection. Now, despite its size, the Game Boy obviously wasn't short of classic games, and they brought together over 100 titles, box art photography, screenshots, and expert commentary as a reminder of just how good Nintendo's handheld revolution was. So you can check out that and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 417, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to the show. Of course, a podcast that every single Friday for the last 8-ish years now has kept you up to speed on all the big happenings in the world of retro gaming and technology, speaking to veterans of the industry, people that are making incredible new hardware and new software for retro titles, and of course, bringing it up to speed on what's been happening in the world of retro from over the last 7 days with our consortium of cartridge connoisseurs. You like that?
I like that.
Yeah.
I did like that. I'm going to put that on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, there you go. Headline for your LinkedIn profile. Yeah, or your email signature. Put that in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's what we do on the podcast every week. Of course, we like to have a little round table about what's been happening in retro. And then second half of the podcast is, I think, where the show really comes into its own. That's when we chat to all manner of people who are involved in retro gaming, you know, to put that broad umbrella over it in all its wonderful forms. And actually, this week, we're going to be talking to someone who makes modern games with a very big retro influence on them. And someone actually you were hanging out with the other week, Ravi, at an event in Nottingham.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking with Ali Motisi, and he is the founder of Out of the Bit. You may know Out of the Bit from Full Void, which is just such an amazing title. And it is kind of inspired by retro stuff, but it's a modern title. And we've seen a lot of this in the indie game scene where you're having, you know, retro-inspired titles from certain genres that, you know, some people have seen as lost, and bringing them back for a kind of modern audience and getting them on modern systems like the Xbox, the Switch, but also on the Evercade, which is pretty cool because Full Void was the first independent title release on the Evercade, so the first single game on a cartridge.
Yeah, because normally Evercade titles are compendiums, aren't they, of several games on one
usually
cartridge.
it's a collection, but having a sole release on a cartridge is pretty cool, especially in the modern age. And I love the Evercade. I think it's great. But Ali talks all about his history with Out of the Bit, kind of why he wanted to do it. And also, you know, some of their other titles like Super Arcade Racing.
Yeah, now Out of the Bit have got a really interesting history. I mean, you and I, Ravi, were obviously, we gravitate towards this because Ali's a huge Amiga nut, as we are obviously. And we hear about his history in Italy, growing up in Sicily and, you know, the Amiga scene out there. And then the thing I love about this is, I mean, we mentioned Full Void on the podcast when it was first revealed about a year ago, didn't we? And if, for people that haven't played that, it's a game, like you said, for modern systems, including the Evercade, that is very heavily influenced by classics, you know, that rotoscope look, you know, games like Prince of Persia.
Yeah, and the kind of shading as well. You know, it's got that kind of Amiga feel, but then it's got lots of new dynamics added in there. So, you know, Full Void is a mix of puzzle elements, platformers, and it's also got running and chase sequences in there as well, and every single death is animated.
And as you'll hear in a moment, the reason that it looks very authentic to the Amiga is because a lot of it was made on the Amiga.
Yeah, which is mad, thinking making something on D-Paint and then putting it on the PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
I just kind of love that journey.
And it's got Amiga mod music as well, you know, made in Pro Tracker and Octamed in a lot of the titles as well. And, you know, even games like Super Arcade Football, I mean, for me, I didn't mention this in the interview, but modern football games, and, you know, I think you're the same, aren't you, Joe? Try and play FIFA I don't know which character I'm controlling on the screen.
I've just not got an interest in it, unfortunately, with FIFA and stuff. I'd much
It's
rather
not
be
even
playing
FIFA anymore.
It's not. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
EA Sports.
Yeah.
I've got mates who are like really into it, and you go around for a drink or whatever. Oh, do you fancy a game on the PlayStation? I'm like, okay, if I have to. But if I go back to something like, Sensible Soccer or Kickoff 2, even though I'm not the biggest football fan in the world, I can have fun with those games. And looking at Super Arcade Football, it's definitely heavily inspired by those games. And you mentioned about the racing, Super Arcade Racer as well. If you love games back in the day like Overdrive from Team 17 and ATR and even like Micro Machines.
Supercars as well.
Yeah, those classic top-down racing games. You'll definitely love the titles that Out of the Bit have released over the last couple of years. And the good thing is as well, because when we mentioned it on the news about a year ago, I remember looking at Full Void and thinking, that is so up my street, and just completely forgot to pick it up. So after we were chatting to Ali, I went on the Switch eStore, picked it up for $5.
Yeah.
Which is just like, absolute bargain. And particularly recently, because I was really hyped for Flashback 2, that kind of long-awaited proper sequel to the original Flashback that obviously came out 30 years ago now. I didn't buy it in the end. I saw the reviews, so many one-star reviews, and people saying just how dreadful it was. So this kind of fills that gap for me, having a game that kind of feels like a sequel to Flashback that I can run on modern systems. So if you're all interested in how he uses Amigas to make, like you said, PlayStation and Xbox and Switch games. Really interesting chat with Ali Motisi from Out of the Bit, our special guest on the show, in around half an hour from now. Now, we have reached the end of February, so that does mean this coming weekend, Sunday evening, it is going to be Patrons Hangout, which we'll talk more about in just a bit, how you can get involved in that. I did mention to Joe before that I've kind of double booked this weekend because my mum is coming to stay. So
get her on the Hangout.
Going to say, might have a special guest on the Hangout on Sunday night.
Do you remember Dan annoying you with
definitely
requests for video games as a youth?
The amount of stories you'll ask her about and lots of ways you could embarrass me. Maybe I'll just pretend I'm going out to tidy the garden for a couple of hours at 8 p.m. in the dark on a Sunday night. So that is going to be happening this coming weekend at theretrohour.com. If you want to join us on Patreon, we'll give you more details on that in just a bit. But there is lots of news stories to bring you up to speed on from over the last week, including a game that I've got to admit, whenever we talk about Star Wars on the podcast, I kind of feel like I should have my geek badge stripped off me.
Absolutely.
I'm not
tear it off his chest.
I've never watched a Star Wars movie.
You know what? It's funny because of the fact that you've never watched a Star Wars movie actually linked into this month's After Hours episode we did for our Patreons last week, which was the I Can't Believe You've Never Played. And it came from, I can't believe Dan's never watched Star Wars. I will take the lead on this week's news story.
Hey, I've watched all the Star Wars films, but I watched them later because I had to watch all the Star Trek ones. And
you two were brought up on Star Trek, weren't you? I'll give you that because you're both Trekkies, weren't you?
But I must admit, I've probably played more Star Wars games than times I've seen the movies,
Yeah, I was going to say, not only have I not watched any Star Wars films, but also I've never played any of the games as well. But I do know they've got a very good reputation. And it turns out if you loved Star Wars Battlefront, those games have been re-released in a collection that includes some really impressive new content and new playable characters as well.
Yeah, so I was a big fan of Star Wars Battlefront 2. That on the PS2. Used to play I forget the name of it. I think it was like the Galactic Federation mode or something with my friends, which was really fun game. Those of who aren't familiar with it, essentially it was a big multiplayer Star Wars battle, wasn't it, Ravi? Like 150 against 150.
I occasionally played it because I played stuff like Millennium Falcon and I think it was Battlegrounds as well.
Yeah.
Which was another one. But I did see clips of this and I think I must have picked it up and played it. I remember the Walkers, on the original one, but I've not played the second.
Yeah, so the second one was very similar to the first one, just more content. But it was online back on the PS2 and the original Xbox and PC, and you could do like 16 players versus 16, but you'd have 150 troops on the map, and essentially it would be a big battle in classic Star Wars situations, so like the Battle of Hoth and the Battle of Endor and stuff like that, and it was based on the original trilogy and the prequel trilogies, which came out in the late 90s.
Was it out at the same kind of time as Jedi Knight Academy?
Yes,
And,
it was it was around the same time. I think it was 2004. I want to say number 2 came out. The first one was the year before.
Okay,
So,
I see the period it's in with Star Wars games, because I remember at one point it went all Lego Star Wars, didn't it? For a long time.
Lego Star Wars kind of came a little bit after this. But Star Wars Battlefront, there's a really, really, really big, kind of like fan base there, and to a point where you can still on PC. There is still servers going for people playing Battlefront 2,
cool.
where they've kept them going and stuff like that, even though they were switched off, officially years ago. And you can still find them and go on there and play them. And there's just so much to do in these games. And they were ported to Xbox 360 and stuff like that, but, they weren't remastered or anything like that. And they've recently actually been taken off the Game Store.
Ready for this, obviously.
Ready for this, I imagine. So we are getting a Star Wars Battlefront Collection remaster, which was announced at this week's Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. But it is going to be coming to all modern platforms, and it will be released on March 14th, so only in about 2 or 3 weeks. And you will get Battlefront 1 and 2 on there. The whole game's obviously remastered with lovely remastered graphics, etc. All the original game modes will still be in there. And as you said there, Dan, there is going to be a few upgrades, a few extra levels. So there's a couple of DLC levels on the original Xbox version, such as Jabba's Palace, which is going to be included on this one. And there's a couple of extra characters you'll be able to play as. So as part of the battles you would have, I can't remember, it's been a while since I played it, but if you're playing like really well, it will ask you when you die, because what it is when you die, you get to pick like your class. Do you want to be a normal soldier, like infantryman, or do you want to be like a heavy soldier, or do you want to be an engineer? They'd all have different weapons and abilities. And if you are playing well, it asks you if you want to be a hero character. So if you're playing as the good guys, you could be a Jedi. Playing as bad guys, you get to be like Darth Vader or Boba Fett. And they're including some more heroes in this remaster. Sorry if this means nothing to you guys, but Kit Fisto and I'm going to say this wrong, Asajj Ventress. I'm not actually too sure who that is.
I don't know much about Star Wars, but I know enough not to pronounce the character name wrong. Otherwise, you may get.
I'm not too sure who that character is, and I do consider myself a Star Wars fan. So.
It's interesting as well. There seems to be like a story behind Battlefront 3 and Free Radical as well, and some cancellation and the development not happening because of issues with LucasArts as well. So that would be a great episode to do, wouldn't it? The story of Battlefront 3. If we spoke to some of our friends at Free Radical.
Yeah, it would be a very good episode to do, actually. Funny you should say that. That's one to put a pin in, I think, there, Avi.
I wonder if this sells well, maybe that could inspire it.
Yeah, that would be cool. There was some offshoot Battlefront games for the PSP, and then obviously they relaunched the Battlefront brand with Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2 in, I want to say, 2015 and 2017. They came out on modern consoles, which were good games, but they removed a lot of what made the original. They kind of removed the board game element to it, and the campaigns as well. They were just online, massive multiplayer online. But speaking of which, like I say, the original was like 16 players online. This one is going to be 64 players online, up to 64. So really, really big battles there, big space battles and on land battles and stuff. So I'm looking forward to this one. And one thing that's exciting as well is there was a hero mode in the original game, in Battlefront 2, where you could just have a game playing as heroes, but you could only play that on one level, which was Tatooine, and then now modding the game so you can play that on any of the levels which are included in the game.
As a kind of Trekker or Trekkie, I must say that Star Wars definitely had the better games.
What are Star Wars fans called? Are they Warsies?
Warsies? What was that?
Is that Star Wars fans? If Trekkies, Star Trek fans are Trekkies, are Star Wars fans Warsies?
I'm just like, stop
Stardies.
Trying to get involved in the conversation.
Go back to bed, Dan.
All right, okay, let's move on from Star Wars. No one cares about that. But if you do, the game's out in a couple of weeks' time, so I'm sure that there'll be many people looking forward to that.
For all you Warsies.
Yeah, for all you Warsies out there. Right, next one story now. This one I think is an exciting story. As someone who did mod an original Xbox, not quite back in the day. I think if you said back in the day, you'd imagine it was during the console's heyday. But I think I soft modded my OG Xbox in around 2011, 2012. And back then, I kind of assumed that most of the exploit methods had been explored and kind of, were fully developed. And I don't know if you guys have ever modded an original Xbox, but I've got vague memories of needing, so you and I, Ravi, were talking before we recorded, you needed a game. I think it was Splinter Cell.
Yeah. There were certain games that had the ability to kind of exploit it in there. And, it's interesting because the whole original Xbox modding scene, I remember seeing some amazing stuff. And that's where XBMC came from.
The media center, yeah.
Yeah, ended up turning into Cody, well, kind of a pioneer in like some of the stuff that we have today, even streaming and stuff like that, all came from this kind of scene. It's interesting because you needed the original game and you also needed an adapter which would go into the controller port and an old flash stick as well. And it's like the older flash stick that you used for it, the better. And then you'd have to run a soft mod tool and all of this kind of stuff. Well, why has that changed now, Dan?
Well, I remember there was a bit more to it when I did it. I remember having to have my Xbox case open and a PC with an IDE interface next to it, and then literally had to yank out the IDE cable from the Xbox drive and plug the PC into it so the PC could read the contents of the disc.
Oh, wow. Okay,
that's how you soft modded it, because basically what the Xbox does is it locks the hard disk, but when the system's on, it's running and accessing it, it unlocks it. So what you need to do is quickly plug the PC in while the disk is unlocked.
Maybe methods have like changed and been updated over the past few years.
Well, I mean, it looks like now, I mean, I remember doing that. I mean, a little bit nervous, basically hot swapping an IDE hard disk, which was never intended for that. But now there is a new original Xbox exploit that basically means there is potential to soft mod your console using just a memory card.
I always forgot that the original Xbox had a memory card because I assumed it had the hard drive inside on some of them. But yeah, and you'd stick it in the controller as well, which was always kind of a weird
like the
thing.
N64, or the Dreamcast.
No, doing it from the memory card and loading an exploit probably means that you're gonna not need any crazy CD-ROM.
Yeah, this new exploit is called Endgame. It is a universal dashboard exploit for the original Microsoft Xbox. And the way it works, which I'm sure will make sense to some people out there, is it is an integer overflow in the dashboard's handling of save game images. So basically, you can put a save game image on the memory card, specially coded one, then the console will try to read it. It will then use this exploit and is then able to execute its code, basically. So at the moment, this is really just a method that they've discovered that's working on there, where you don't need any games to do it. Apparently, you don't even need a working DVD drive. All you need is a memory card.
And I guess you'll be able to obviously load anything on there and have, region-free stuff as well. And it's got lots of benefits, but it sounds like it needs to get developed.
Yeah, well, at the moment, they're saying basically this method, the vulnerability has been discovered. Right now, you can't use it to soft mod your console, but the fact that it exists, I imagine, will mean that, the soft modding community will jump on that and it will get kind of baked into...
Yeah, just like FreeMut Boot, you buy your memory card, put it in, and then pretty much done.
I mean, I'm thinking, there are some comments on the on the tweet here, people saying, what's the point in soft modding an original Xbox in 2024? Because I mean, when I did it like over a decade ago, the original Xbox was a really good system for emulation. I remember having a menu on there with like loads of MAME arcade games on there, loads of Mega Drive and Super Nintendo games. Some Amiga games were on there as well, I remember, which obviously today you can do that a lot easier and, a lot quicker using something like a Raspberry Pi.
And I don't know what the prices on Xbox games are, but every time I go into like secondhand shops, there's tons of them, and I've still got a lot of nostalgia for it, and I'd love to also, get on the 360 and maybe have an old Xbox setup.
Yeah, so if you are a fan of the original OG Xbox and you want to run a very simple exploit on that, it looks like life could be made a lot easier very soon, so we'll keep an eye on that news story. Now, we did mention the Evercade. We're going to be talking more about that with our guest in just a moment, Ali Motisi, the founder of Out of the Bit, of course, who's got that incredible Full Void game on the Evercade. But there are lots of other titles that are on the system recently as well. Like we said, most of them are compilations. And there is a new compilation that's going to be on the system in April this year, the Pico Interactive Collection 4. Now, the reason this is making the headlines is this is the first time we've seen an N64 game running on the Evercade.
Yeah, so the Evercade is kind of like advertised as being able to run, 8-bit, 16-bit, and 32-bit games. Can't think of many 32-bit games, if any, off the top of my head that I've seen on there yet. So maybe they're just jumping straight to the N64.
They're mainly 16-bit era stuff, aren't they, that I've played on there? That's the main.
Yeah, it pretty much like NES, Mega Drive, SNES kind of stuff, isn't it? And then obviously modern indie stuff.
Atari Lynx collection.
Atari Lynx collections, and stuff like that. But yeah, Glover 64 is going to be on this collection, which is interestingly the only kind of 64-bit game on this collection, because there is 10 games on there. I won't go through all of them, but Street Racer, Star X,
I love Woods, Street Racer, Mavdink, great title.
Yeah. Bad Street Brawler, Zero Tolerance, Underground on there as well, which are all kind of 8-bit and 16-bit games, or depending on which version of it is. Because I know Street Racer came out on everything, didn't it? PlayStation.
Yeah, they even got an Amiga release, I think, back in the
Amiga, yeah, it came out on everything. But yeah, the reason this is doing the rounds is because of Glover 64 being on there. And obviously this isn't out yet.
Comes out in April.
Comes out in April. But it's, the emulation of it and everything, from just the little 30-second demo they've put out there, they're kind of saying, this is what we had on it before. Now we've got 64-bit emulation on there. So I think, it's very, only a very few seconds you see kind of the game running and everything looks fine. Obviously, the internet can lie to you and stuff like that. But Evercade are generally, I can't see them doing that. I can't see them lying or anything like that.
They generally care a lot about their releases and put a lot of pride into them.
More and more, I'm looking at the Evercade as the system I want to get. I've been looking at all these mini releases and mini consoles and stuff, and they don't really appeal to me. I like the idea of someone actually picking games for me and being able to plug them in and actually play them and swap them out that way, rather than sitting with endless lists and going through stuff or having to soft mod my mini console or load stuff on a USB. It does seem nice, and they also seem reasonably priced as well.
Yeah, they're definitely reasonably priced, and I would say the cartridges are as well. And I know what you're saying there. It's kind of like that doom scrolling for games now. Yeah. We have that many games accessible to us. It's nice to have, I guess, a cartridge with 5 or 6 or 10
and
games.
It's like 90. It's like 90 quid for the Evercade VS.
Yeah, not too bad at all. But yeah, Glover 64. It, bit of Vaseline looking graphics, on there as per the N64. But if it runs well and it's a success, it'll be cool to see what kind of, other games they can kind of get the license for and get on there. I obviously imagine it'll be third party.
Yeah, it probably won't be Nintendo stuff, will it?
Or Rare maybe, because obviously Rare's Microsoft now. So it'll be interesting to see what we do get on there.
I've never played Glover before. It looks a bit weird, this game. So it kind of looks a bit like a...
it's a puzzle platformer.
Yeah, but you don't play a cat, you play a glove. Hence the name. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a concept I've seen before in a video game. But yeah, I do think that is really impressive because, the Nintendo 64 is notoriously a tricky system to emulate well.
Yeah.
And the fact that, it's running, if this does run smoothly, which I imagine it will on, what is essentially quite limited hardware, it must mean they've optimized it very well, and kind of opens the door to maybe more. Like you said,
well, you've got the analog 3D, which is that accurate N64 kind of emulator. It'd be nice to see how this, pitches up.
Yeah, the fact that this is running nicely on there is quite a big leap. So, if you're a fan of the games from Interactive Studios back in the day, nice little collection, including that N64 port Glover that is going to be out in April. Pre-orders are available on the Evercade website right now. Now, there's a couple more stories before we hop into our guest this week. Ali Motisi coming up in just a second. Now, Jeff Minter. Can we do the Wayne's World We're Not Worthy thing?
We're not worthy.
We're doing it now. Obviously, we love Jeff. Had him on the podcast good few years ago now. Interviewed him live at Play Expo. I remember Ravi and I playing around on his Nuon.
Yeah, also featured him in our book as well.
Yeah. Recently, if you missed that interview, it's in the Retro Hour book as well. And I've always loved Jeff's games. I even go back to games of his I played on the Amiga back in the day. And he's definitely kind of found a niche in these psychedelic shooters in recent years. I mean, obviously he did all the stuff like Tempest on the Jaguar and that Defender clone he did on there as well. He's really known for kind of updating classic arcade games and giving them that really trippy psychedelic look in recent years. And one that I loved on the PlayStation VR a couple of years ago. And I'll be honest, I got a PlayStation VR for the PS4, barely used it. The only game I really regularly came back to that, not really a console, that add-on for, was Polybius, which was a Jeff Minter shoot-'em-up game that worked so well in virtual reality. Did you guys ever play that when I had my PSVR setup?
Yeah, I played it. And, I think the stuff about like Jeff Minter's games, obviously Tempest is amazing, but stuff like the Virtual Light Machine and having that kind of light synthesis in there as well. I recently wrote an article about Tripotron, which was a light synthesizer by Jeff Minter, and those visuals work really well in VR. It's pretty amazing. I really enjoyed Polybius. It was a tough game though.
Yeah, and I got quite far into it, and weirdly, when you're playing that game, because you think, does shoot 'em up work in VR? That was my initial impression when I got it. But actually, you kind of go into a bit of a zen-like kind of state.
Yeah, you've got to get into the zone with that game, definitely.
Yeah, and I love that. Like I said, it was really the main reason that I got my original PSVR set up just to play Polybius. Well, it turns out Jeff Minter's latest game, which, how do you pronounce this, Joe? You were practicing this earlier.
Aka
is coming to the PSVR 2 next month. Now, we were looking into the history of this because they're basically saying it's, a classic Atari game that's been brought back for VR. That's kind of the headline I've seen everywhere. Actually, it's got quite an interesting history because this was a game that should have come out back in the early 80s from Atari. But actually, it was made by two Atari employees, Mike Halley and Dave Ralston. And the name Aka is a play on words for also known as another Ralston-Halley production. It was shown to a little test market back in 1982. Obviously, the peak of the Atari arcade titles around that time. But apparently the test market didn't like it. And they found the game was too difficult. So Atari scrapped it back then.
It's interesting to see as well because this is the modern Atari and maybe they've changed their kind of tone because, 8 years ago they threatened to sue Jeff Minter for his title being too similar to Tempest. So, there's now they're working together. It's kind of good to see because he's got a good history with Atari, but there has been ups and downs.
Yeah, now this looks like, again, if you like Polybius, another psychedelic arcade shooter game. It's actually released on all the main platforms today, at the time this podcast comes out, 22nd of February, on the Switch, PlayStation, Steam, PS, all of that, Xbox. Yeah, there is going to be a version of it coming to the PSVR 2 next month. Now, in terms of VR, I remember you about a year ago, Joe, picking up a Meta Quest 2.
Yeah.
And saying to me, I don't think I'm going to ever play anything else.
I knew you were going to say that.
What did I say to you at the time? I've got one, it gathers dust.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like, I got a new job about a year and a half ago, and to celebrate, I got a Meta Quest 2 because I really, really wanted to play the Resident Evil 4 VR, which is on there, which is based on the original. It's not based on the remake. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I did say to Dan, like, I generally don't see myself like, I was kind of half joking. Like, I didn't think I'd ever not play Xbox and stuff like that again. Yeah. But I was like, this is insane. Like, I loved it. Like, and I found that so immersive because obviously it put it into a first person perspective for you. And, you're pulling the guns out your holsters yourself and your shotgun off your back and all that fighting, zombies or ganados, they're called. Nobody shout at me. And like, it was just insane. And now obviously this is kind of like a top-down shooter kind of tower defense game.
Yeah.
obviously in true kind of Jeff Minter style, like it is incredibly colourful and psychedelic. And I'd be scared that I'd lose my mind playing this in VR.
Did you ever play Polybius on my PSVR?
I want to play it on the Apple Vision Pro whilst walking through the streets of London.
Really psychedelic. I did play the Polybius on yours. Yeah. I think I played it for about 5 minutes, and then I played it at the the Nottingham Video Game Museum when we had that National Video Game Museum before it moved. Played Polybius on PSVR there as well. Once again for about 5-10 minutes before it was like, okay, I've had enough of this. And they were like, oh, but you can play it for as long as you want. And I was like, no.
Yeah, my stomach disagrees.
Yeah, it's wicked, but Jesus, I'm like, yeah, my stomach and my head is just, this is crazy kind of thing. And maybe that's just because at the time I hadn't played VR too much. And
you've got to find your VR legs, I think they call it, don't they? The more you're used to it,
100%. But yeah, just going back to what you said, my Meta Quest 2 is now sat in a drawer gathering dust. But it did get hammered for about 2-3 months across about 2 or 3 games. But yeah, I really like the look of this. I can't see it. And I know he's such a legend, but I can't see myself playing this for too long.
You've not been to enough sketchy parties, Joe.
Yeah, maybe that is the.
Ravi's played this in real life.
You've got to ride it.
But I mean, to me, I'm looking at this, and I would love to play this in virtual reality. I mean, if it came out on the Quest 2, that might be a reason for me to set mine up again. I'm not going to fork out like £400 or £500 for a PSVR 2 to play this game, because that's the thing. I want to love virtual reality. And I've got the PSVR 1. I use that, again, when I first got it. It's that novelty, isn't it? You load. And then I thought maybe it's just all the wires. Maybe that's why I don't like it.
I had the Vive, and I thought, HTC Vive 2, and I was plugged into my computer and making sure I didn't run off too fast and pull all the wires out and stuff. And it, I've kind of been lost on the VR appeal, but there's always a new device or something that always looks exciting. Like I've seen, there's Apple Vision Pro videos everywhere at the moment on every channel talking about how they're using it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the Meta Quest 2 as well. Again, played that loads when I first got it. I haven't used it for about 8-9 months, maybe now.
Yeah, but there's some people that jump on everything. I can imagine there's going to be like someone spinning around in a Tesla, coming out with a Vision Pro, and
I've seen that already on YouTube. Yeah,
power gloves and all of this kind of stuff.
Even the other day, though, I was in Curry's and I was looking at the Meta Quest 3, thinking, So I did stop myself before I did that. No, it's that's the AR one. But I mean, I do love new technology, and I love it when retro and kind of new tech get merged together. But I still need something to hook me into VR. I don't know.
They need a VR cafe where you can go and try them all out, and you don't have to buy it, and it gathers dust.
Yeah. So if you're a fan of these Jeff Minter games, though, I mean, I'll be buying this on the Switch to play, in 2D. But if you have got a PSVR 2, could be a nice little addition to your collection. Because, like I said, Polybius, absolutely awesome. If you haven't played that, definitely worth a download. Now, what's the best thing you guys have ever found in charity shops or thrift stores, as are?
I found an original box version of Doom for about £2.50. That was pretty amazing.
I'm trying to think. I've got a sealed copy of Martian Gothic for the PC in my cupboard. Big box version of it. It was Martian Gothic was a Resident Evil clone that came out in the late 90s. And I've got a sealed copy. It's my only sealed game I've got, which is retro. Found that in a charity shop for £1.
Wow. It's always great when, it's rare to find decent stuff in charity shops over here these days. I remember finding a Dreamcast keyboard and mouse in a charity shop about 7-8 years ago. But the only really cool thing I think I found, and they were about £1 each as well, in the box.
In between the copies of FIFA.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, in between,
nicely.
Between FIFA 2000 up to 2015. But this sounds like a very interesting score. Now, a rare prototype of a game that actually has been getting quite a bit of coverage recently. We've been talking about it quite a lot recently, thanks to that new Arzette, or Arzetti, however you pronounce it, game, which we talked about, a few months ago. This was kind of that game that's based on those terrible Philips CDI Mario and Zelda games. Hotel Mario, I think, is kind of the one that most people think of, because it turns out that apparently a guy who was browsing Goodwill, which is a charity shop in America, came across a rare prototype version of Hotel Mario for the Philips CDI.
Yeah, so this is a YouTuber who's called Game Pack Rat, who is only a small YouTuber, and he mainly, by the looks of things, his channel is him going thrift shopping and looking for video games and kind of pop culture related kind of items,
those videos are always therapeutic, aren't they? Like LGR's thrifts and Pat the NES Punks videos back in the day.
Yeah,
he goes to a lot of Goodwill shops and checks them out.
Yeah. So just kind of going around all of them and stuff, and he has found Hotel Mario, and it was it's printed on a blank disc, as these beta copies tend to be. So it's the beta copy of Hotel Mario. And it was just an empty white jewel case CD. And he says, as a thrifter, he tends to check these when he sees them in the CD racks and stuff, just to double check.
Very wise.
And as he said, he actually found a Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack, and just in like an empty disc once, just a disc in like a empty CD case kind of thing. So he always checks them just to see if some random disc's been put in there. And printed on the front is beta Hotel Mario. And the date is the 23rd of the 11th, 1993, which is a year or so before the game actually came out.
Right.
And, top bloke, he's put a video up already of the intro of the game, and he's going to dump the ROM for everybody, to download and have a go on and stuff like that, with a few of the differences. But the main kind of difference at the start is in the final version, Mario reads a letter, which kind of explains the point of the game. You're going to save Peach from 7 worlds of hotel worlds, and it's Mario who reads it out. Whereas in this beta version, it's Bowser who reads it out.
Right.
It's a different voice actor to who was actually in the final version of the game who played Bowser, and also says there's 8 worlds rather than 7 worlds, which I would suggest, due to time constraints, maybe a world got cut from the game. But how insane is that? It's quite a rare sought-after game anyway, just because obviously it's not very good.
Not because it's good, The opposite.
Do you think Nintendo are going to take it down? When he puts a copy up, would they?
Maybe they will.
If the only reason they would is because of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I can't see them caring
and
about
bring more
Mario.
attention to it.
Yeah, maybe. But do they actually own the rights to this game because of the whole weird Philips CDI deal
collab
they had? But what I think is lovely is he said he's putting it out there for everybody for free and everything. The only thing he asks in return is to subscribe to his channel or watch some of his videos to get him a few more views, which hopefully he will. He's got 2,000 subs at the moment, and this latest video's got 50k views in 2 days.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool for him.
I always wonder. Oh, sorry. I always wonder, these kind of people finding stuff in thrift stores, are they targeting like certain areas where they know video companies were?
Maybe.
I can imagine the Silicon Valley thrift stores were full of people in like the 90s and 2000s, and would have regular people, or places like Seattle as well, and big development places. In the UK, we had the Silicon Roundabout, so maybe some charity shops near there might have some beaters.
Interesting you say that, because of Metal Jesus Rocks. He lives in Seattle, and they had Sierra Games, isn't it?
Yeah,
they were there, and he finds a lot of their kind of stuff. In the thrift shops and stuff like that. And interestingly, he's found like the N64 DD. He found a few years ago, but an American one, which was never released.
Yeah, that's the ultimate find. That is.
Yeah, that was like the ultimate find as well. I think you're right there, Ravi. I think if you kind of go around the thrift shops in the areas of these game companies, you might find something eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, Ravi's booking his flight right now. Very, very cool, though. So if you want to check out that previously unseen beta gameplay of Hotel Mario for the Philips CDI, we'll link that video up, and, of course, the rest of the stories. And hopefully he will get that image dumped so you can download the ISO file, and there's no copy protection on the CDI, or you can play it on an emulator. So it will be quite interesting to see. So I'll put that, and, of course, the rest of the stories, you don't have to Google around. I save you the job each week. I'll put them in the show notes on your podcast app, or head to the website at theretrohour.com. Now, the shortest month of the year is almost out the way. That does mean last Sunday of the month. Patrons Hangout is coming up this weekend. Always a bit of a giggle, isn't it? And It's nice to catch up with our community. We talk about so many different subjects on the Hangouts, and I love it when people show off their collections, stuff they picked up over the last month or so, when we get advice off people, and it's just a wonderful community that we built up around this podcast.
Yeah, we always see new people as well, and it's great to have like new energy, and we've done them at different times as well, and we've got different people, and I can imagine it's quite tough for some people getting on it at certain times with time zones and stuff.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing this month's Hangout Sunday evening, 8 p.m. UK time, 8 till 10. So basically, if you haven't been on before, it's a massive Zoom call, isn't it? Or actually Google Meets. We all get together, loads of people on the screen. We'll just chat about retro stuff, geeky stuff. So if you'd like to join us for that, as Ravi said, we're always very welcoming of new members as well. So if you join our Patreon community today, you will get an invite for that this weekend. And the bonus podcast that we do just for our gold members and above, which actually we've just recorded, episode 40. This week, which is nuts. And this was one of the most fun episodes I think we've ever done of the After Hours.
It was an interesting one. We did the, as I said earlier on the show, I Can't Believe You've Never Played. And we all got, well, we didn't pick it. We all picked 3 games for each other. Games we've never played or experienced before to go play and give our thoughts on. And we all kind of fell into our own little like genre or period of time in gaming, didn't we?
But put it on the other people. So I got kind of like very Joe Nintendo-y suggestions.
And I got very Ravi suggestions. And then Dan got a bit of a mix, didn't you?
Yeah. And there's a bit of controversy in here because Joe and I actually slagged off 2 massive franchises on this show.
We did.
Yeah, I've already seen a bit of chatter about it in our Discord. So if you want to get access to that, and actually we do a video version of the After Hours podcast. We've been trying video on that show as well. So if you join us as a gold member above, you unlock all previous 40 episodes, and you can check out the video version of the podcast as well. So all the details to sign up on our Patreon are at the website, theretrohour.com. And of course, we'd like to welcome new members of our Patreon into the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, and that is the Retro Hour Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame!
And a massive welcome to Seb,
Justin Jutman Hickman,
and Rodney Underkoffler,
who all joined us on Patreon over the last week or two. We hugely appreciate your support. And if you'd like to join our wonderful patrons community, as I said, all the details are at theretrohour.com. Right then, patrons, stay locked. There are some more news stories on the way for you because we chop all the adverts out of the patrons version of the show. So we have a couple of extra news stories just for our patrons every week. We'll do those in just a sec. For everybody else, thank you so much for checking out the news this week, and enjoy our special guest talking about developing modern games using classic systems like the Amiga, and of course that wonderful game Full Void with our special guest Ali Motisi. He's next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with Ali Motisi, and he's the founder of Out of the Bit, also producer and lead developer of the fantastic Full Void. How are you doing, Ali?
Yeah, very good. Hi, guys. I'm a big fan of the Retro Hour, so I'm very excited to be here with you tonight.
Well, you'll probably know our first question that we ask every single guest, and that's, what was your first gaming experience?
Okay, let's see. So I grew up in a small village in the 80s in Sicily, the south of Italy. Like many people, I spent my youth disassembling toys to see how they worked, especially my sister's toys. She's not very happy about that. But I also remember looking at computers in films and series like Knight Rider, and I was always intrigued by those. At some point, I went to my cousin, and he just got a Commodore 64. And I love the machine. So I asked for, I wanted to learn to have a computer of my own. So I asked my parents to get a Commodore 64. And they went and bought me a BBC Micro, which, I was very happy with. Because to be fair, it was a great choice. It came with a guide to learn BBC Basic, and which was very good. So, yeah, I guess, looking at films, and then, I got my own computer when I was 8.
I think the BBC Micro as well, the fact that you got that in Italy, that's quite interesting, because obviously that was a very big machine over here in the educational market in the UK, and it was the industry standard, really. So it's quite interesting that system expanded to Italy.
Yeah. Funny enough, I discovered later on, so it was an Olivetti PC 128S, the specific model. Is basically a BBC Master rebranded by Olivetti, which was a big brand in Italy. That's why most of my games were British, basically. And we kind of started my interest with the UK and the British gaming scene as well.
So you did a bit of playing with BASIC as well. Did you move on to any more advanced languages? And where were you kind of getting your coding examples from?
Yeah, again, there was the guy that came with the machine, which was very well put together. It was translated in Italian. So I could learn from the guide. But I mostly did BASIC at the time. I was very young. I was 8. So I never advanced. I did a bit of pick and poke and stuff, but nothing too advanced until I was older.
And did you have any like formal training with computers at all later on as you grew up, or did you just get into it as a hobby?
I got into it as a hobby for myself, but then later on I went to university to study engineering, like computer science.
Okay.
And there I did my formal, training with the programming and all the rest of it. But I always program ever since I was 8, just because I liked it. So I mostly learned basic C and C++ on my own, Java as well. And by the time I was at uni, I was already programming.
Were you making any games or anything at home then and kind of giving them out to your friends or releasing them like a shareware or anything like that?
Yes, I did at the time as well. And after the BBC Micro, I moved on to the Amiga, which I loved. And I know you guys are big fans of the Amiga as well.
Oh, yes.
And funny enough, even though it was a small town, there was an Amiga club in the town where people could, because that was before the internet, right? So it was hard to get to any knowledge of people that had knowledge of programming and stuff. So having the club was really great. People were getting demos from abroad and tampering with them, modifying the demos. Writing games, nothing too serious at the end of the day, but we all practice and exchange stuff. It was pretty good fun.
So did you code with any of your friends, and how come Out of the Bit was formed?
Yeah, basically when I finished uni, I got a job in Sicily, but there is not a lot in terms of game development. So I had a look at the UK, and at the time, the first mobile phones were getting started with screens, and there were a lot of jobs. So I decided to move to London to make games, basically for early mobile phone. That was before the iPhone. So if you remember the early Java-enabled phones, they were very similar to like the games you will find at the Amiga or the Super Nintendo. And I think that was quite nice. So it was a nice transition for me to start writing those games. And then obviously phones got more and more capable until the iPhone launched. So at that point, I was working for other companies. And when the iPhone launched, I saw the opportunity to start my own company because at the time I had no kids and no mortgage. So it was a lot easier to take risks. So I left my job and started Out of the Bit. Which was, again, a bit of a risk, but it was a good opportunity because with the iPhone, all you needed at the time was a laptop, a Mac, and then you could write games and put them on the App Store.
And you're right, some of those games were quite cool, actually. That J2ME stuff, I remember. I think it was Sonic CD. It was a really nice mobile port back then.
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with the Java Micro Edition. Also because of the limitation of those phones. So I always found that limitations are quite nice in terms of overcoming the challenge and try to make something good, which, in the retro scene nowadays, people do amazing stuff with those classic machines. So it's always a challenge, but there is a big reward when you manage to do what you want. And then, as I was saying, once the iPhone launched, then I started the company and I kind of made classic games for the iPhone and the iPad, and then slowly transitioned to more complex games, kind of growing the company slowly.
I guess that kind of early indie gaming scene on mobile, it must have been quite reminiscent of, the 16-bit systems and stuff you're doing like back on the Amiga and that kind of stuff, was it?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It was same resolution pretty much as the Amiga, so standard pixel graphic, and it was. Even the input, some of the early phones, some of the Sony and Nokia had a little joystick, which was a bit fiddly, but it was quite fun too when you managed to play a game like that.
I remember on the Sony Ericsson, it was like a little joystick kind of knob. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, also at that time when you started it, indie games started to get really taken seriously. You know, there were titles like, I think it was 2008, like Braid that came out. And, you know, seeing these kind of titles getting respect, did that kind of push you in that direction away from the mobile market?
Yeah, absolutely. So my passion was always like games for the Amiga, Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, that kind of games. I really love the classic pixel art games, and when I really transitioned to 3D at the time when we had the PlayStation and Nintendo 64, it was great, but we kind of lost a little bit of the small teams creating very creative games.
Yeah.
So because teams got bigger, of course, and things kind of changed a little bit. They're still great games, but I always loved this kind of games made by smaller teams, right? So that, like you're saying, with the indie scene around the time, I remember I went to watch the Indie Game, the movie, and I was very impressed with what very small team, like 1-2 people, managed to do, really. So that kind of inspired me as well at the time to tackle more complex projects and say, okay, maybe we can try and do something more interesting here.
In that kind of pre-iPhone mobile game scene, how did you distribute the games then? 'Cause I remember even the App Store launching on the iPhone was a big deal. I've got vivid memories of trying to download games on my PC for my Nokia, then loading them via serial port or USB onto it. Was it difficult to distribute them and get attention back then?
Absolutely, you're right. It was very expensive. You need a server and send some kind of WAP push message to the client, and then people will have to first have an internet connection, which wasn't granted. It was very expensive as well. Then download the game, and then on most phones you could install it. But it was very, very cumbersome and very expensive to manage. That's why I wanted to start my own company, but it was very expensive. And then the iPhone kind of solved that problem because I could just distribute my games anywhere very easily. And then Steam did the same, of course.
Yeah, Steam. And Steam really later on embraced indie titles as well. How did you end up going then from mobiles to super arcade racing?
Basically, we started doing more and more original games on the App Store. Keep in mind, Outbit is being founded in 2008. We never had any investor, any money coming into the company. We just grew the company very slowly. So we had to be careful with taking risks. So what we did initially was release a bunch of classic board games, right? And expanded the portfolio slowly. And at some point, I wanted to try something more original. So we developed a rhythm game on the iPhone, which was called Planet Quest. That was very, very successful. We had millions of downloads, especially in Asia. They really like rhythm games. And that was quite a surprise for us and kind of allow us to do other more original titles. And I'm a big fan of, like I said, Amiga games like Sensible Soccer or Overdrive for Team 17. So I thought, maybe we can create something similar to those games, but with expanded features, maybe online. And that's why, we had the idea of making something for PC as well, which wasn't mobile first or touch first as an input. So the first project was Super Arcade Racing and then football as well.
Yeah, for people that haven't played this game, it's available on Steam now. Came out about a year ago. Looks very much. I remember games on the Amiga like ATR, All Terrain Racing by Team 17,
Supercars as well.
Yeah, even Micro Machines as well. Graphically, were they much of an inspiration for this and gameplay wise?
Yeah, we look at many games. Personally, I really like Overdrive by Team 17. Not many people like that game.
Yeah, I remember that. I had a cover disc of that actually.
Did they have rockets on the cars and stuff like that?
No, there was Roadkill, I think.
Oh, Roadkill, yes.
yeah. I played that one as well. I tried to play again Overdrive, and I'm terrible now. But at the time I liked it, and I always like top-down racing games. So there was really a fun project to do. We really went to town with the story. Obviously, compared to the older system, now we got more memory. You can have like more content basically for the game. So we created, I went on to create a custom engine in C to make pixel art games because I wanted to do something that could be ported anywhere, not just for the iPhone, right? So racing and football, so Super Arcade Racing and Super Arcade Football are the first game created with Serial Box, our engine. And that really allows us to go to town with the pixel graphic and the animations, and also to make sure we supported as many platforms as we could, and including online as well.
Yeah, I mean, talking about assembling that team then, I mean, how did you kind of get the team together? And I mean, looking at these are some gorgeous pixel graphics on here. I mean, how did they go about creating those graphics and finding a pixel artist that will kind of, retain those kind of authentic style?
Yeah, that's tricky, you're right. And thankfully, the company is located in Wimbledon in London. So it's quite easy to reach out to people and find a lot of talent in terms of location. I put an ad and I look at lots and lots of CVs, and I came across a very talented pixel artist, Dave, and he actually worked back in the day on the Mega Drive as well. He's done a bunch of titles on the Mega Drive.
Nice.
Very experienced, very talented pixel artist. And that, and together that's basically with Dave, we did the graphic for football and racing. It is really good. And you guys will like this one, actually. When I set up his computer, he told me, I work with this old software. You probably don't know it. It's called Deluxe Paint.
Oh, wow.
And I was I know this software.
Did he still use that to make the game then? Did he do a lot of graphics in D-Paint? Wow.
Yes, he used D-Paint, but he's so fast with it. You will not believe it. It's incredible. To watch him draw is insane. And so I actually said, no, I know D-Paint. And so I had to set up an emulator. And he had his own copy of D-Paint with all the assets, his own animations. And he's so fast with it. It's incredible. So, yeah. And now he's like kind of retired. He still does freelance work from time to time, but we're still in touch. And he's a great pixel artist. He's so good at animating. We had really fun with the football racing.
That explains why they look so authentic then, if he's done it on the Amiga. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he's done it on D-Paint, entirely.
And that title ended up going onto PS5 as well. And
correct.
What was it kind of like instead of being on the mobiles, going onto the console?
I felt great. After many, many years of doing mobile games are great, but with time, mobile changed. It became full of currency, microtransactions, advertising. One of the things we do out a bit, obviously we have to put ads in our mobile games because that's how you monetize, but we always give people the option to just pay a flat fee and just remove the ads, because I like, some people may want to play with kids or they want to see ads. So it's nice to have the option to pay and remove ads. And also the controls, right? There are so many games you can do which are great on mobile, like, Cut the Rope and Fruit Ninja, these kind of games, Angry Birds. But sometimes other types of games, you really want to have a joypad, or a joystick.
And also implementing stuff like, multiplayer on the PlayStation Network. Was that tough to do, or was that all within your engine?
Yes, it was. Engine-wise, it was very easy. We ported the engine on PlayStation in a couple of days. Same with Xbox. Very easy to port the engine. The problem is obviously if you go cross-play with different platforms, then there is a bunch of requirements. Correctly so, for safety and security. So there is a lot of requirements to satisfy, and that's what takes time normally for consoles, the certification process. Little things that are important, back and forth. It's mostly like this kind of agreements and bureaucracy that takes time. But overall, it was great to port on the consoles. Obviously,
the game coming from Deluxe Paint to the latest piece of hardware. It's a great path. Yeah,
Amiga graphics on the PS5 is something very cool about that, I think.
Exactly. We always make fun because we go, we are now at the moment we are porting the games to the PS5, right? And we are like, we are really using this GPU. Yeah, we're really pushing the GPU here. But it speaks a lot. But there is a market for that. People like retro games and PS5 as well. So.
And I think they're very at home on the Switch as well. I mean, obviously the Switch is a different architecture to the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. I mean, was porting it to that system a different challenge? And what about kind of getting Nintendo's approval? How does that kind of work? Is that loopholes you got to go through there?
Yeah, you're right. No, it was actually great fun. It was so incredible for me, having grown up with the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS as well. Having my games on Nintendo was great. It was so good. And the process was actually quite straightforward. You have to get used to it, right? Because it's a bit more complex than the App Store or Steam. They're like more, the process is a bit more involved, but nothing too bad. It's actually very well organized. I have to say, the backend of Nintendo is really well organized. So the first time is getting to know how it worked, but then the second time it took me like a few days to have a football ready on Nintendo Switch after having done racing. So they're pretty good platform, pretty mature by this point. But you're right though, in terms of the pixel art games on the Switch, they look fantastic. It's just there's something about it that the smaller display that just makes them feel at home on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, it's turned into a really great platform for kind of retro style stuff as well, hasn't it?
Yeah. Totally.
Interesting that you mentioned Super Arcade Football there as well, because that kind of genre was dominated by Sensible Soccer and titles like Kickoff as well. How did you make it stand out and be unique from these titles without trying to kind of replicate them?
Yeah, good question. We didn't want to copy Sensible Soccer. Obviously, it's definitely that same type of game as Kickoff and Goal or Sensible Soccer, but we got our own twist to the game, not just in terms of gameplay, but there is also a story. So the game is a bit more light-hearted. We're not trying to do a simulation. Like Sensible Soccer at the time was really cutting edge and was really a great game. They really went for like simulation at the time, which was excellent. I loved the game. We went for something a bit more funny. So there are a bit of funny things happen on the pitch as well. You can be hit by a meteorite, for instance. We got modifiers, so you can have like things like mud or oil streaks, so you can play with bigger goalposts as well. And you can even customize your own tournaments. So let's say you want to play with your friends in the office or anywhere. You can set up your own tournament and then save the tournament and progress with it. And plus, again, we got a story mode, both game, Super Arcade Football and Super Arcade Racing. We really went to town with the story. And like every 5 levels, there is a boss fight. And then you basically unlock the next stage of the story. And the story is told by little heads, with text below. And also, we're using mod music for Amiga mod music for the sound, for the music itself. Which
was that made on the Amiga as well, like Pro Tracker or something? Or
yeah, I mean it's Robin Powell making the music. She's great. She's very, very young. She's when we started working together, she was 21 years old. But she's into the Amiga and the retro scene as well. And I wanted to have authentic mod music on those games because I like the limitation of 4 channels and the split left and right is really, really powerful. So we actually developed our own mod player to play 100% like Amiga in Amiga quality, and it's 100% compatible with Amiga. And Robin produced the music in such a way it can actually be played on the Amiga. And the advantage of this is the retro feeling and sound, and also it doesn't take much memory, so the game is always fast to load. And plus, for football, actually, the music was composed by Barry Leach, which you might know.
Great.
I had it on the podcast, actually.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
Legend.
I was thinking as well, playing that title, it was a really smart move to just make it a little bit slower. So whenever I play Sensible World of Soccer, it's, blasting up the pitch and it travels really fast. But just that slight slowing down of the gameplay made it seem a bit more kind of tricky and a bit more requiring more timing and accuracy with it.
Yeah, you're right. That's something we did on purpose because we tried the game with lots of friends, family. We went to events and exhibitions and we saw kids playing. And it was important for us that the game was accessible to everyone. Also, if you play the story mode, your team is quite slow at the beginning, but it gets faster as you get towards the end. But by that point, you're quite familiar with the controls, so we can afford having a faster game, like closer to sensible soccer in terms of speed. So there is a balance there. You're right. It is quite important nowadays. If you pick up any of the classic retro games, they're very hard to play most of the time for modern players or modern standards
and
anyway.
To keep it simple as well. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I mean, I'm looking at this and I can't play modern FIFA. I get lost in it. But yeah, stuff like, Kickoff and games like that I can play. So this looks like a good balance, for people that grew up with those games.
Yeah, totally. It's great that you mentioned that because I remember before deciding to make Super Arcade Football, I went to a friend's house and he got an Xbox and we played FIFA together and I could not play the game. Again, FIFA is great and people love it. I understand that. It's just not for me or for many people because I was there and I asked my wife, I said, should we play together? We make a tournament. And we did not enjoy the game at all. So it's not pick up and play, Yeah,
100%. Well, another incredible game that, I saw a lot of people loving, and I remember us talking about this on the podcast, because, I love games like Flashback, for example, and Prince of Persia. Full Void, which is a real cinematic puzzle platformer game that is available now. So where did the idea of this come from then? And why did you decide that you wanted to make a platformer? What kind of inspired this?
Well, I still remember the day I put on Another World on my Amiga and I watched the intro and I was so blown away that the game started. Yeah, even understand I had to play the game. So it made a big impression on me. Same with Prince of Persia. I was a big fan of the original Prince of Persia. I played that so much. I can speedrun that game even now. So I always liked these types of games. And that's something I really felt I couldn't do on the iPhone or the iPad. I love, the iOS ecosystem platform at the time, but I wanted to do something along the lines of classic cinematic puzzle platformers. So after the experience with football and racing, I felt like we were ready to tackle something bigger. So as I said, we tried to do one step at a time within the company to not take too many risks. And once we developed something, then we tried to step it up. And again, there was one of the types of games I love the most, cinematic puzzle platformer. So we started working on Full Void. That was around 2020, and then you guess what happens? Having that year, there were lockdowns, and it was especially hard for me because I had to replace key members of the team during that time, and it was very hard to look for people, interview and hire people. There was so much uncertainty. And also I had to take care of my two twin girls, which at the time were 11 years old and obviously were off school, needed. So that was quite tough for me as a director of a company and a producer of games. So I kind of, it helped me to, during these times to kind of channel all my feelings into this game, into Full Void. And I said, okay, now it's the time to really make the puzzle platform I wanted to make. And that's why the game is so dark and dystopic in a way.
I was going to say about the kind of dark dystopian theme, Will with no adults, kind of Lord of the Flies style as well. And I used to watch a TV show called The Tribe where all the adults died, and it's kind of got that vibe. Where were the influences from, and what was your kind of like design mood board that you guys had?
Yeah, many influences really. At the time, I was reading a book called The Tripods, which is from an English author, and is about I don't know. There was a BBC series in the 80s as well about the tripods as well. They're like kids, and at some point, basically, they're free until they're 12, and then they put a chip on their brain, and then they become a slave. So it's a long story, but it's really, really good. So the tripods is one of the influence. I'm also a fan of like some comic books, like there is one which is very obscure. It's called Guyver. It's basically a kid that finds an armor, and then he can basically connect with the armor. It's like connected with biology. So there is a lot of biology in it, which we kind of link to Full Void as well. If you play the game at some point, it kind of plays a role as well. Also, Stranger Things is, it's very, very much an inspiration in terms of the mood and the music and the atmosphere as well. Lord of the Flies is one of my favorite books as well. For some reason, I don't know. I read it when I was little.
Left an impression.
Left an impression, for sure.
It's what my school was like when I was a kid.
So yeah, and I really had this idea where, again, there was this teenager, which is the main character of Full Void, and it's alone, and you don't know why. Something is wrong with the world, right? You don't know why. And by playing the game, we decided, as opposed to racing football, we decided to tell the story without text or dialogues. So no text whatsoever, apart from the main menu, the interface. So the story is told by environmental storytelling. And it was quite a challenge for us. But it was mostly Leonardo, Miles, and myself working on the game. So Leo and Miles are pixel artists. So they retired at some point, and Leonardo contacted me, and he was fresh out of uni, was looking for an internship. And we had a chat, and I really like his attitude, and he's very versatile. And so he joined the company around the time we were making Full Void. And then we got Miles on board, which is a fantastic pixel artist and is really good with the environment as well. And basically the three of us made most of the game. They did the graphic, I did the programming. And then we had Tom Cullen joining us at the end of the project for animations, because we really, really went and put lots and lots of animation in the game. Everything you see in Full Void is hand-drawn and hand-animated. There is no 3D.
Yeah, it looks stunning as well. And I mean, even in terms of the gameplay as well, because I'm thinking back to, you mentioned a couple of games that, I loved playing when I was a kid, Another World, Flashback, Prince of Persia, and I can definitely see the influence here as well. But how do you kind of balance the, the different styles of play? Because you've got platforming, you've got puzzles as well. And also, I mean, thinking back to those classic titles I mentioned, you often got some parts of the game that felt a little bit unfair, or some kind of cheap deaths. I think you probably termed them. How did you kind of avoid that then? Did you learn anything from those classic titles, like what not to do?
Yeah, that was quite tricky actually, because if you play those games now without save states, they're quite challenging. So I also like a modern puzzle platformer like Limbo, Inside, Little Nightmares as well. So that's also something that I played. And I like. My only problem with those games is that they're great, but I can't play them with my kids because they don't like violence or gore. So in Full Void, even though the game is a bit dystopic, we try to stay away from it. And in terms of balancing the difficulty, we put lots of checkpoints in the game. So if you die, you don't restart from the beginning of the level. And that really helps.
I think that's kind of creepier as well, not having the actual violence and stuff in there. Because it's suggested, what's going on, but you don't really know the details.
Yeah, that's true in a way. Yeah, it's like a horror film, right? When you see the monster, it's like, I don't like it anymore, right?
Yeah, leave it to the imagination.
Yeah, it's best to leave to the imagination.
And also, every single death has a different animation sequence, and other studios wouldn't put that much effort in. And, doing that as a move, I think that's really great, because that kind of focuses on that time period of gaming, especially with, Flashback and the death sequences that you had on that.
Yeah, totally. We really had fun making the death animation. We call them fail animation because on some platform we're not allowed to say that. So it's fail animation. So, that was really good. So we started with one or two, and then we said, okay, we could do this one. And there are even a couple that you only see in two places, which is, we spend 5 days making those animations. But, if you find them, that's great. There is an achievement if you die in all the possible ways, so you see all the animations. And again, that goes back to the fact that I really like I was not expecting this when I started Full Void, but during the process of making the game, I really fell in love with working with the talented artists and animators, and it's so good to work with them. And the advantage of doing 2D games is that really, and being a small team, we can go from idea to implementation in one day. So we say, okay, why don't we do this in this place of the this part of the game? And the guy go, oh, but we will do something else instead. They got great ideas, and then they draw it, and then we put in the game, and it's there. It's so quick in terms of, with 3D quite often you need someone doing the modeling, the rigging, the texturing, and all the rest of it. And it's quite, it takes time to put it in the game. It's one of the advantages 2D.
Yeah, and also having like hacking in there is a really cool element, but also having a companion. So, you're not just solving puzzles by yourself, you're using your companion to solve puzzles, and it kind of feels like you're not so isolated in this world.
Yes, yeah, you're spot on. So it was quite challenging because the main character is a little kid, so he can't really fight. He hasn't got any weapon. So in terms of gameplay and to keep the game interesting, in terms of progression of difficulty progression, it was really hard to come up with stuff that we wanted the player to do. And one of the solutions was, okay, you're there, you can't really do anything yourself because you're a little kid, but you got a backpack, you got a computer, you're a hacker, and you can hack stuff. And that really unlocked a new dimension for the game. Because then, yes, you can actually kind of fight back, but not directly. And it's also good for puzzle because, again, it means you have to plan in advance what you want to do. And then you're right, like most of the game you're alone, but at some point you find a companion. And I think that's a great moment because then it's, oh, okay, I'm not on my own. I'm not completely on my own. And obviously in the story, there is flashback as well. So you see there is a connection between you and the companion and your family basically there.
Yeah, and I think the fact that hacking has, been so big in media over the last decade, games like Watch Dogs and Mr. Robot, a TV series I love, it seems like it's quite on trend to have a hacking element in a game.
Cool. Yeah, I've not watched it actually. I need to watch it.
Oh yeah, definitely worth a watch. Well, let's talk about the music in the game because that is incredibly atmospheric. And you mentioned about the fact that there was in those earlier titles you using the Amiga. What about in this game though? I mean, in Full Void, how did the music work in that game? And are you surprised at the reaction? Because I know people love that soundtrack.
Yeah. And again, it was Robin Powell. She did an amazing job, and it's still mod music.
Oh wow!
It's still Amiga mod music. Yes.
It's so atmospheric. It's
she's so good. She's so good.
It's really got that synthy kind of inspiration,
Yeah, she's very versatile, so she can do, we gave her references, of course, but then she went to town and she did lots and lots of different takes. So much so that we decided to put the soundtrack available for anyone. So if you go to our website, outofthebeat.com, the soundtrack is there. You can download the soundtrack for free, MP3 and mod music, and you can play on your Amiga.
I'm going to DJ some of those tunes for sure, definitely.
You got my permission. You can do what you want with those mods.
I'll mix them in. Yeah, it's quite a short title to complete it. How important was having achievements in there to lengthen the game and add a bit more fun?
Yeah, that's we wanted, our target for Full Void was to give people like an experience like watching a film or reading a short book or a comic, right? So I like, when I read a comic, I like the fact that, you read the comic, it's over and the story is finished. You don't milk it forever for and there is a start and an end to the story. So the idea with Full Void was to give people like a story and then end the story and that's it. So our target was about 2 hours. We ended up exceeding. So I think the game, if you play the first time, is about 3.5 hours of gameplay, which is good. Some people find it short in terms of game compared to most games, but that wasn't our target, to be fair. I just wanted to give this experience to people and then be done with it.
It's also a small team as well. If you're doing every death sequence and you're making a 16-hour long gameplay.
Yeah. Keep in mind every single screen is hand drawn. We don't use tiles. It's every screen is custom, is hand drawn, and every animation is handmade. So it's a lot of work. But it's not just that. As I said, the main character can't really fight. He's a little kid, so there is only so much you can do in terms of puzzle and platforming. And I didn't want to dilute the game and make the game 6 hours for no reason. I would love to make the game 10 hours, probably no more than that, because I don't like the games are too long, right?
Yeah.
I like that you are able to finish a game, because myself, when I see a game is 100, 300 hours, I'm not even...
No, to me, 3 hours is a good length, because it is a game that I've got a good chance of completing, because there are some games like the tutorials are 3 hours long. It's like, you feel like you've only scratched the surface of them. And obviously if you're aiming at, players that were into retro games and these original titles back then, a lot of them are growing up, they've got families, they've got jobs. So, time is at a premium really. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Yeah, exactly. That was our aim. I wanted people to be able to enjoy Full Void from start to finish. Yeah. And maybe if they liked it, to say, you know what, I like this game. I'm waiting for the next game from this company, right? And that's what we want to do.
Well, one thing I love about Full Void is not only is it on the mainstream platforms, if you like, but also you released it on the Evercade at the end of last year, and having it on that system, I think, is really cool. I mean, we've had the Evercade guys on the podcast before, and I love their ethos and, the fact that they curate their collections, they don't just put anything out. And actually, I believe Full Void's got the accolade of being the first ever single game cartridge on the Evercade, which is massive. So tell us how you got involved and how special that feels.
Yeah, that feels very, very special. I'm so happy and proud to have the game on the Evercade. As I said, I started the company making games for mobile phones, and to have something physical like a cartridge you actually put on a device, and the box and the manual, it's great. So how it started, so we went to Nottingham. So everything starts in Nottingham. I don't know, guys.
Center of the world, Nottingham, yeah.
It's center of the world, you tell me. So I was in Nottingham for the Video Game Expo in 2022. It was around November, December, I believe. And also there, I think I met you guys there for the first time, actually.
Yeah.
And there were also Liam and Mark from the Evercade Evolution magazine, which is a fun magazine for the Evercade.
Yeah, that's a great one, actually. Really good shout to those guys, because that's such a niche. And it's such a cool little magazine.
Very well written as well.
Yeah, it's so cool that something like this exists, like the Evercade and a fun magazine for the Evercade. How cool is that one? And so they were there, and I started chatting with them because I love the fact that there was a magazine about Evercade. At the time, I did not own an Evercade. I wanted to buy one. So I got to talk to them. How is this model? What do you suggest? And they were very, very friendly. And they saw that we were making games as well. And so at some point I got to a hotel, and then I got an email from Liam saying, oh, you know what? I put you in contact with the people at Blaze because I think your games are great. Football racing will work great on the Evercade. And I was really blown away. I was like, oh, thank you so much, Liam. You're so kind. Honestly, just unprompted. It's great what events and communities can do. So I was very thankful to them. So he got me in touch with the CTO and CEO of Blaze, and they came over to our office in Wimbledon. We had lunch together, and we talk about football racing, but they saw Full Void, and I think they really, really liked it, because on the spot they said, I think we can make this the first single game cartridge on the Evercade. And was, if you want to do that, I'm all for it. On my part, I said, we'll make sure we have a great assets to go along with the game for the physical release. The guys were very excited in the office to work on the Evercade as well. So they started working on an art book, and I spent a lot of time working on the art book together with Leo. Mm-hmm. And so if you get there are 2 editions for the Evercade, the regular and the special edition as well. The special edition has got the art book, which is really, really good. Both of them, they got also a comic that we did for the Evercade version with a prelude story, the backstory of Full Void, what happens before the game starts, which is great as well. So it was really nice to do something custom, something physical for the Evercade. So we got the art book, we got the comic for both editions, and then the manual. The people at Blaze, their team did a fantastic job with the manual. We provided the assets, but they really put it together in an amazing way. When I saw it, I was blown away. This is really a good manual.
I love the fact that you're kind of going from, a digital download on something like the Switch and then hitting physicality on like a obscure system like the Evercade. It's really good.
Yeah, my life is going backwards. I'm going from digital to physical.
Speaking of which, actually, because obviously we see a lot of titles coming out on modern platforms that then get backported to like retro systems. So would that be anything you'd ever maybe consider doing? I mean, I'm looking at, Full Void. I'm thinking that would probably play pretty well on like the Dreamcast or something. I mean, would that ever be something that you look at doing, like games for retro systems?
Yeah, totally. I don't rule it out. In fact, I had a look at the specs for the Dreamcast specifically. The Dreamcast is feasible. The main limitation is the 16 megabytes of memory, but there are ways around it. So I started looking into it. In between things, when I got time, I would love to bring it to the Dreamcast. I also started playing with the Scorpion engine for the Amiga, but it's a bit tough to squeeze Full Void in there. Who knows? Maybe one day.
Watch this space.
Yeah, with all these powerful accelerators, you never know.
Yes, I can do with the accelerators, yes.
I was wondering, are there, like, you've explored FPS, you've explored sports games and racing there. Are there any other genres you'd like to get into?
Probably. I wouldn't mind exploring types of games. But at the moment, I really like the experience with Full Void. And I think we got another games we want to make in the similar style. But I love you guys, so I can tell you guys a few things.
No one's listening, only us.
Yeah, it's just us. So yeah, basically, again, out a bit, we're a small team. I like to see the company a little bit like a small studio from the 90s, but nowadays. So it's just a handful of people working together to make handcrafted games. And the things for me is, in an age where we got realistic 3D, AI images, we're trying to do everything by hand, like I mentioned, to draw everything by hands. And it takes time, but, when people see the results, I think they really like to see the hand of the artist. It's like when you read a comic book and you can recognize the way the comic book is drawn. Like, you can recognize Akira Toriyama, for instance, right?
Yeah.
That's nice. And it's something you don't see when you got 50 people working on a game. You shouldn't see it, actually. So again, we'll have a game that we want to announce soon. What I can tell you is it's not a sequel to Full Void. It's a new story. So we got a new story to tell. And we doubled the resolution and we doubled down on the amount of animations. So we already have about 2,000 animations in the new game implemented. To make it possible, basically, we made the change to the engine to have a file format that allows for really, really long sequences of animations without taking memory, or much memory, really. So we can really compress and put more animation. What we want to do is to show people more handcrafted animation. As we are not in lockdown anymore, thankfully, then next game is going to be very colorful and very different. It's a different universe compared to Full Void. But I think if you enjoy Full Void, you're going to love the new game. And we can't wait to announce it. So what I can say, people can follow us on social for updates. And again, when we got something ready to show, we'll be very happy to show it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about it on the podcast as well. I'm sure we will.
And it was fantastic to see you get some accolades as well at the Debug Indie Games Awards.
Oh, that was unbelievable. Honestly, we were not expecting to win. There are so many great games. We're very happy to be there. Just to be there was great. So when they called our name, they mentioned Full Void. We had a couple of seconds before we realized, okay, it's us. So that was fantastic. It was so good. I was very happy for the team as well because they put their hearts into the game. And it's great to see the people like the game, people love the game, and they stopped to talk to us as well, which was fantastic.
Well, Ali, it's amazing to see in this this day and age of these massive AAA titles out there, and sometimes people complain about lack of innovation in modern gaming. Great to see a studio with these sensibilities of these games that we grew up playing and that great small team feel as well. And I love the fact that you're using systems like the Amiga for graphics and audio and bringing them to new players and new platforms. That's just incredible. And as someone who grew up playing games like Another World and Flashback, Full Void just looks absolutely amazing. So that is available now on current platforms, including the Evercade as well. So if people want to check out your website and your socials, I'll link them in the show notes as well. And best of luck with the next title as well. Hope it goes well.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you guys.